All right, thank you very much, Mr. Scott. And I also want to thank our ranking member, Thompson, for putting this together today. Obviously the future of electric transportation is bright. And certainly we appreciate all of the witnesses for their input today. And especially how we can make sure that rural America is not left behind as we continue this conversation. Let me look at it this way. And I know we've talked about it a little bit, but obviously we have electric vehicles, major, as I see it, as many of us see it, a major positive step toward decarbonization in the transportation sector. And really, we as has been acknowledged, there's going to be a little bit of time before we get to this, full EV, and every vehicle that's coming off the lot is an electric vehicle. The climate is calling for us to bring down carbon emissions now. That's not something that we can continue to just put off. And I appreciate our witnesses, a couple of whom mentioned a bill that we've written out of my office, the Next Generation Fuels Act. Really happy that we have bipartisan support for that. So thank you for our Republicans and Democrats who have signed on to this. And just very briefly, this is a bill that has support of many of our witnesses today, but it would require automakers to optimize their vehicles' engines to run on high octane, low carbon fuel, so like E20 and E30. There's been a recent analysis out of the University of Illinois in my home state, University of Illinois at Chicago, that says that the Next Generation Fuels Act would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 2 billion metric tons by the year 2040. And that would save nearly $100 billion in climate-related property damage and public health issues. So this question can be answered by Mr. Strickland, Mr. Nasser, Mr. Cooper, Mr. Walter. If one has something to add after the next, please do. But can you talk about how a new era of low carbon, high octane liquid fuels in the Next Generation Fuels Act specifically would impact your businesses and your members as we continue to transition to electric vehicles? Why don't we start with Mr. Strickland and then go to Nasser, Cooper, and Walter, whatever you have to add on that, please.
Well, Ms. Bustos, clearly before we get to our all-electric future in 2035, we're going to be selling internal combustion engines. As I noted earlier, we will be selling 30 to 40 million of those vehicles. And the ability and the opportunity to be able to use lower carbon fuels such as higher octane is incredibly important. There's advantages there where you can get 3 to 9% better fuel efficiency with higher compression and higher octane fuels and biofuels. And we believe in the path to zero is going to be inclusive of that particular pathway. We're looking forward to working with you and the members on your important legislation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Well, first of all, it's going to be very helpful for the agricultural implement sector because it's really going to, help increase, demand for farming equipment. So it'd certainly be helpful on that score. It would also be helpful, in meeting the CAFE standards, which, we're supportive of the moderate standards that were put forward, finalized by the Biden administration with support from automakers. But this will help comply with those standards. So this is kind of an overlooked area is the fuels when it comes to having, how that could really improve, reduce carbon emissions and improve
manufacturing employment. So it's important.
And thank you, Josh. Yes, please.
Yeah, thanks, Congresswoman, for the question. This is certainly a piece of legislation that we strongly support in the ethanol industry. We do think it marks a huge step toward decarbonizing our liquid fuels. You're right, it's going to take a long time for the fleet to turn over to electric vehicles. We ought to be doing something in the interim, and your bill would move us a long way down that road.